Hello there, I'm Jimmy Vegas and this is how to make a hyper-casual game in Unity, and welcome to episode 6. In this tutorial we're going to add some more C# coding to these catch platform buttons where we can only actually have them on, we can't multiple click, and then we're also going to start using something called instantiate to randomly generate our balls or orbs dropping. Don't forget, click on the subscribe button and click that bell icon as well to stay up to date with every tutorial still to come in this series and everything else on game development on my channel. With that in mind, let's get to work. So first things first, let's go back into the code for these particular catch buttons. So on global scripts, let's go into catch function script right there, double click. It will highlight down there in the assets window and then it will open up in Visual Studio for us. So the way we're going to do this is we are going to add in something called a bool. A bool is true or false. It can only be one of those two. So essentially the way it's going to work is if we have this activated, then we can not do any more platforms. And I guess it's entirely up to you whether you want just one platform active at any one time or whether you can do all three at once. I'm going to go for one platform at a time that you can have active. Again, it's entirely up to you how you want to do it. You will just use the same mechanics to do it for each of the three. So public bool, and it's a lowercase b on that one. Case sensitivity is vital in C# coding. Let's call this active plat, and by default we can actually make it false semicolon. So here, whereas we haven't had before saying platform left platform equals this, same with score updater, we haven't set anything equals. We can actually declare something in the variable to be equal to something, in this case false. So on that premise, what that means is that if the active platform is equal to false, then we can run each of these. So that means adding a quick if statement here. So if, and we're in the left plat method here, if, and in brackets, active plat equals, and that is a double equals. The reason we use double equals is because we're questioning. If we use a single equals, we're telling. So that's how you can always tell when to use double equals and when not to. So if you are asking something, you would use a double equals. If you are telling it to be something, you would use a single equals sign. So if active plat is equals to false, open curly bracket, and then we can actually delete that close curly bracket, and then beneath the start coroutine, put the close curly bracket there. So what this is saying is that if it's equal to false, then just do it as normal. So we would do the exact same for all of the others. If active plat equals false, and get rid of that, and then place it down there. You can see how it's coming into being here. It kind of indents everything for you, which is a really nice feature. Once again, if active plat, if I spell it right, equals false, then open curly bracket, and then beneath coroutine, close curly bracket. So that's all good and well. But the problem we now have is this isn't going to make any difference whatsoever because we don't change the status of that bool. We need to change that status so as we cannot run it over and over again. So that means the very first line in each if statement would be active plat equals true, because it now is going to be true. So we may as well set that bool as true at this point. That means that it will still run these next two lines of code because it's still inside this active if statement. So that line of code will apply here to each of those three methods. Now the problem we have now is that it will work, but because we don't set it false at any point, it will work once and only once, and then we won't be able to press any other buttons. So that means that in our reset coroutines, after we have set it active as false, we then need to set active plat equals false too. And that means that we can then regenerate these up here and click them as much as we need to. So let's take that line and place it as the last line of code in each of those coroutines and save. So we've advanced this script a little bit further now by adding in these if statements. So what is this doing exactly? How is this going to work? So let's say we're going to press the left platform. Well, the active plat is already set as false, which means that if active plat is false, then we do this code. If it's set as true, this code will not run. So let's assume we've pressed it and it's false. First thing it does is say it's true, but it still carries on with the code. So it sets it on and then starts that coroutine. So down here in the coroutine, it waits for half a second and then it turns the platform off and then sets the active platform back as false. And that means we can click any of these once again. So let's head back into Unity and test this out. Let's give it a second to compile, the little circle down there. And we don't need to set any more variables over here, but you will notice this active plat is now a little tick box. So if we press play, you should see this tick box go on and off quite a lot. So let's try that. Perfect. But now there we go. So you can't multiple click. Well, you can theoretically multiple click, but it doesn't flash like it did before. See? So there we go. Now, I'm quite happy with how they are for now. However, you can advance this even further if you want to. These are the basic mechanics of how this is all going to work. I would advise, if you want to, by all means, playing around with this, seeing what you can come up with, because it's always good to work with code and just play around and see what results you can come up with. So, next thing, let's use something called instantiate to randomly generate these particular orbs. And the way that's going to be done is the 3 orbs that we have, we're actually going to store off camera somewhere. So I'm going to re-enable them all. Not the platforms, the actual orbs. There we go. So these orbs I'm going to keep off camera. Reason being is because we don't really need the we don't need them on screen. They're going to be used to kind of store their actual item themselves. So I'm not really good at explaining this, am I? So the way this is going to work is we're going to basically duplicate one of these 3 orbs every, let's say, half a second. And these will never change. These will always stay static. So we make copies of these particular orbs, and that's how we're ultimately going to do it. So realistically, what we need to do is take the 3 of them and move them somewhere way off screen for now. Probably to about there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a platform just beneath them, just so as they don't infinitely fall. So game object, 3D object, cube. And let's expand this cube to be, let's say, 5 by 5. And let's just bring it into a position to about there. So I'm just going to call this orb holder and just bring it up to here. And you can see that they're not going to go anywhere. They're just going to stay there, and they're not going to fall down from our screen now. However, what we do need to do is take our main camera, and we're now going to need to establish a couple of positions. Now, I think ultimately we probably could have used the orb's position where they were originally. However, let's get the positions that we're going to need. So let's go to game object, and let's go to 3D object and sphere again. And let's set that to 0, 0, 0, and there it is in the center of our screen. So the middle platform, if we turn it on, that falls nicely in line with the middle platform. So it's going to be fine on X, 0, Y, it's going to be probably, let's have 5. So we'll have 0, 5, and 0 as one of the positions. Now, it's probably a good idea to write that down, which I am going to do right now. So 0, 5, 0. So Y looks like it's always going to be 5, because I think that's a good height, because we can't see it on screen, it will generate. So next, let's bring it down, and let's bring it across. And that looks like it should fit perfectly in the left platform. Let's turn all platforms on so we can see. And it does. So we're going to have in this instance minus 1.5 by 5 by 0, which ultimately would mean that a good position for the right hand side is going to be 1.5, and it is. So 1.5, not 0, 1.5, 0, 5. Tell you what, I'll write that down again. 1.5, 5, and 0. So you can see what I'm doing there. Although that's a 6, I'll just place it back to 5 just so we can see. So that's going to be one of 3 starting points for these orbs. 1.5, 5, and 0. So we need to remember those for our script in a couple of minutes' time. So how are we going to do this? Like I said, we're going to use something called instantiate, and what that effectively does is it's going to end up randomly generating one of those orbs in one of those positions and letting it drop. So we can get rid of that sphere that we had in there. I'm going to keep those platforms on just for now, but what we will do is create a new script. So let's go to the script folder, right click, create, and folder, and in this folder we're going to have anything to do with orbs. So let's actually call this just orbs. And in here, right click, create C# script, orb generate, and let's open that up in Visual Studio. So we're also going to use some handy little tools here. We're going to use something called array as well. Even though we've only got 3, we're going to use array because it makes things a little bit easier with the code. So I'm going to get rid of the annotations because we don't need them, and void start as well. We don't need that method. So first things first, let's declare the variables for the 3 orbs. Public, game object, but before we go any further, square, open and close brackets. This now dictates that this will be an array, and I'll show you how that works a little later on, but essentially it allows us to set in the inspector panel various objects assigned to one single variable. We'll call this orb fall, semicolon. Next we'll have another bool here, so public bool. And I'm going to have this one as gen, short for generating, orb, and we'll have that as false, semicolon. Next, we are going to have a variable which allows us to randomly generate a position, one of those 3 positions that we already know. And then we're also going to need a variable to assign to a random orb. So we're going to have 2 integers here. Obviously integer is the whole number. So public int, we'll call this orb lock, short for location, and we'll have public int, and we'll have orb col, short for color, semicolon. So how are we going to get all of this together to make the whole script that we want to have these orbs falling randomly? Well, it's always best with scripts like this to start small and build from there. So let's start by simply generating some random numbers for the orb location and the orb color. So let's go in our void update, first and foremost, orb lock equals random dot range, and in brackets the minimum and maximum that we want this to be. So we can generate 1, 2 or 3. So if we generate 1, 2 or 3, we need to have the minimum as 1 and the maximum, strangely enough, as 4. So this is one of those things where the maximum number will not generate. It will always generate 1, 2 or 3. It's just one of those little quirks. So this will now generate either 1, 2 or 3. And what I'm actually going to do at this point is save that script, because I need to apply this script to the scene to help you understand why we do the next line a little bit different. So now it's saved and back into Unity. Let's drag this orb generate script onto our global scripts object. over here. And if we click it, we can see that orb fall has an arrow next to it. So if we click it, we can say the size is 3 because we have 3 orbs. But you'll notice element 0, element 1, element 2. 0 is where it starts. Therefore, to generate the first one, we have to say 0. So that means that for orb color or orb col, we need to say equals random dot range. The minimum is 0, which means the maximum is 3. Close bracket, semicolon. So in that case, it could generate 0, 1, or 2. So let's actually assign those variables now before we carry on. Let's have red orb as 0. Let's have blue orb as 1. And let's have green orb as 2. So they're all in place. So now this script knows that we have these 3 different orbs. So next thing to do is we now need to, well, let's save that script first and foremost. So we're going to add an if statement now to say, are we generating an orb? So if gen orb equals false, then we do the following once again. And let's go to the end and have that close curly bracket. So because we are doing that now, the first line of code once again needs to be gen orb equals true, semicolon. And we're also going to use a coroutine here, simply because we need some delay on when we're generating. So after void update, let's have I enumerator, and let's call this orb falling, open close bracket, open curly bracket. And what we're going to need to do is instantiate the orb color at a different position. Now we're going to use a couple of different if statements here, but it's going to be 3 different ones because we've got 3 different positions. So we are going to start with just instantiating the game object, and we'll start with the left position. So to do this, we need to type instantiate, and inside some brackets, we now need to state the orb fall game object, and in square brackets we need to put orb col. Now what's happening here is we are generating this particular object, orb fall, this game object which we have stated up here, and it's either going to be 0, 1, or 2 depending on what has been generated here. So orb fall, and then in square brackets the color. And now we need to declare a position. And we're going to do that via a vector 3 because we're in a 3D environment. So we need to state a new vector 3. And in brackets, the X, Y, and Z or Z position. And we had the very first one as 0. And in fact, no, I did say we were going to start with left, didn't I? So it'd be minus 1.5 F because it's the float. That's the X position. The Y position is 5 and the Z position is 0. So close bracket. That is after the can't get words out, comma. So now that is the location stated. And all we need to say now is quaternion dot identity. And that completes the instantiate line. So now we need to kind of just allow this to do what it needs to do to stop this happening. And we just use the yield function here like we have in coroutines before. So yield return new wait for seconds, and in brackets 0.5 F. Again, because it's a float, semicolon. So what is going to happen at this point? Nothing, because we haven't called this coroutine, have we? So inside this if statement up here, start coroutine, and in brackets, orb falling, close bracket, semicolon. And down here, let's now place gen orb as true. No, false, isn't it? Because we finished now. So false. and save. So let's quickly run through what's happening here. We are saying that the gen orb is generating now because it is set as false, and then we're setting it as true so it can't run again, and then we generate the location, and then we generate the random range for the color, and then we start the coroutine, which is this instantiate, and it'll generate whichever orb is generated up here. It won't deal with the location just yet. We'll deal with that location in the next tutorial. But for now, let's just make sure that we get back here and it will constantly generate orbs in the left place. So let's head back to Unity. And let's press play. And we should see every half a second. There we go. And you can see some physics going a bit crazy up there now. So if we were to set off those platforms and press play, we'll be able to see those orbs constantly falling randomly as well, just random colors. Easy. So next tutorial, what we're going to do is we are going to allow this script to be expanded, and we're going to make it generate in a couple of different places. So we're going to have it here, here, or here. So rather than all fall in the same place, it's going to go in between. I think we might actually add in some sound effects probably as well. Yeah, I think we'll add in a couple of sound effects to kind of move things along, make it seem a bit more intuitive now. So until that next tutorial, guys, thank you very much for watching.